Hello, we're live.
Woohoo!
When I watch these playbacks, I'm always like, we're always just kind of staring at it. And then it's like, hello.
Are we on yet? Is it there yet?
Welcome, everybody. Drop in the comments where you're from, where you're joining us from. We're excited about today's episode. We have Mordy Golding here. Woo-hoo-hoo. Mordy, tell everybody a little bit about you before we jump in.
Oh my God, I don't even know where to start. It's
So
in my
start
LinkedIn.
where you are now. Because
I'm
we're going to talk about where you.
So I'm a group product manager at LinkedIn, and lead a team focused on an area that we call learning engagement for the learning product, for LinkedIn Learning, and it's fun to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Jenny, you need no introduction, but please introduce yourself anyway.
Jenny Von Quarter. I'm a instructor for LinkedIn Learning and business and data spaces. And in the rest of my time, as we were talking earlier, I'm a farmer. I'm a family farmer in Michigan. And I'm here from Michigan this morning, where it is 77 balmy degrees.
Oh, wow.
It's warmer in Michigan than here in New York.
It's warmer in Michigan than it is in parts of Florida.
I don't even want to look outside. I know it's kind of muggy. It's a little bit muggy here. I'm Robin Hunt, fellow LinkedIn author in the data space, co-founder, entrepreneur, all those fun things. And I'm excited about today's conversation because we're going to be talking about products and product-related data. And Mordy, we just really felt like you were a great person to have this discussion with because of what you do. And we'll dive into all of that. But I always like when we have a special guest to kind of talk about how did they get here? Like, what was your path to this point?
It was not a straight line, that I'll tell you for sure. I'm actually more of a designer, graphic designer. Early on, like that's where I started. I love graphic design. Had my own graphic design company for many years, but also love technology. So I was always and I love building things. As a kid, Legos, building. That was it. So I didn't even know there was a role called product management until like I became known in the Adobe community, and Adobe recruited me to be a product manager for Adobe Illustrator. And the product that I love, it's up on the wall. I've written I don't know, who knows how many books and done lots of lynda.com and LinkedIn Learning courses on Adobe products. And then after Adobe found my way to lynda.com, lynda.com got acquired by LinkedIn, and then Microsoft a year later, but here I am still at LinkedIn. So that's how I got here.
That's amazing.
There's a lot that happened in between that, but that's the short version.
That's amazing. So Jenny, tell us a little bit about your path, because I hear some similarities in that we all had a path to Lynda somehow.
Well, I wanted to be a graphic designer. Let me say that. Okay. When I was in high school, my junior year, I'd finally gotten into like our local countywide, tech school, right? And I was going to tech school for graphic design, and I was so excited. So the afternoon I go to the graphic design class, and the instructor starts talking. Everybody knows everybody but me. And that's because they had put me in the second year course. And it's like, well, I'm a junior. And they said, no, you're supposed to be a senior to be here. And I said, well, put me in the junior course. And they said, the junior course is full. And I'm like, well, let me just tread water as hard as I can to stay here, And they said, nope, we can't do that. You have to have the other course first. So there was my graphic design, that was my whole graphic design life. Came and went in a single day. Wow. Due to administrative incompetence. But that was what I wanted to do. I knew that was what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I started actually teaching programming when I was a freshman in high school. And this will date me, but I taught GW Basic on Commodore 64 computers, the ones that you hooked up to your television set. And
I remember using those.
It's like, whoa. So I started out teaching programming. I've dipped in and taught programming and worked in programming a lot of different times during my career. But I think part of the thing that got me here in a weird, different way is that when I was working on my on my associate's degree, my first degree, I worked in an AV lab. And so that involved delivering projectors and equipment to classrooms, but it also involved, if you hung around long enough, doing things like learning how to develop film and run studio camera and run, all of the production boards for a television studio. So I kind of had that sitting in my background. And then I was a classroom teacher, and I kept getting these books that were almost good enough to use in a high school classroom, but they really lacked teacher guides and stuff like that. So I was banging on the door of the publisher. It was Cybex, that I think now is owned by Wiley, but they were out in California. They were sort of the last of the independently owned publishers that were in the computer and tech space. And I kept writing them saying, we need teacher's guides. We need this. And they wrote to me finally and said, why don't you just write a book? And I knew nothing about writing a book. I knew nothing at all about writing a book. The first thing I sent them, I actually sent them like pages that I tried to put the graphics into, and they're explaining, no, that's not how this actually works. They were patient with me. And so I wrote a bunch of books, about 30. They're really huge. I need to get mine on a shelf behind me, like the mastering series for Cybex and books for certification. And then I decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I quit writing. I did a lot of volunteer stuff that took up that piece of my time. And then when lynda.com decided that they wanted to do Microsoft products, one of the people they brought on board was one of my former content editors, Bonnie Bills, who was from Cybex. And so I started working as a lynda.com author 13 years ago. Wow. And with I did these little tiny courses called Real World Beta that were like about how to use the new stuff that came out in PowerPoint and things like that. And then I just have hung around, and now this is what I do. And I love being a LinkedIn Learning instructor. It's a hoot and a half.
I love how you say, I just hung around, when what you really were doing was blazing a path for me. And I tell you this all the time. I don't ever think you actually truly believe me when I say this, but I was training for a national franchise. I became irritated with the class examples because I felt like this is not real world. So I said, okay, it didn't occur to me to reach out to other people. I just said, I'm going to write my own book. And I started teaching from my own books. And then they made me teach HTML. And this is the day when we made web pages in Notepad. And then we opened them up through a browser or whatever. And so Linda Weinman had the first WebSafe color chart that was publicly available on the website. And so I went and pulled that, and I'd let my students pick WebSafe colors in order to build their websites in class. And then at some point she became lynda.com, and she was training Adobe products.
Right.
And I was like, man, I really want to be on lynda.com. Like, that would just be such a career aspiration. And they were like, yeah, we don't really do those products. And like, so I was like, okay. And then at some point you got into the mix. And then at some point LinkedIn allowed us to see who stalked our profiles. And I saw someone from LinkedIn's content team looking at my profile, and I immediately messaged her and said, I want to be on lynda.com. And then she said, well, okay, well, we do now teach the things, but we have an author for that.
That was me.
And she said, but if you could do something like crystal reports, like you teach crystal reports, and I'd written a book about crystal reports, not published by anybody other than me. She's like, just send me a sample content. And I did that, and the rest was history. So, and that was, I think, 2014 or 2015, my first course launched in crystal reports. So yeah, you were just hanging out, building a path for Robin Hunt to get on.
Hey,
and I love that. I just love that.
If that was all I would accomplish, that would be a good life's work.
Oh, I'm sure you've accomplished way more than that. I mean, again, like, I think it's important that we talk about, products actually do build pathways for people.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, because lynda.com was a product, it opened eyes and doors for us to do what we're doing, but it also brought education to people. It's just such a big product type discussion. So
that's how I got into it.
Yeah,
it's actually right here. It's a piece of history.
Let's have it. Let's do it.
This is Linda's book. This is the second edition, Designing Web Graphics.
Yep.
Same thing, right? She was frustrated that she was trying to create web content. There was nothing out there to help her do it. So she decided to write the book on it. The first time I met her was at Macworld in Boston. Here's her autograph, 1997.
So awesome.
Wow.
We did a book signing together. I was doing a book signing for my book on Illustrator. And that was the first time that we were using web design, using a Illustrator for web design at that time. In those days, like you couldn't export a GIF out of Illustrator. You had to get a plugin for Photoshop in order to do that, right? So that was like the evolution of where, lynda.com ultimately went to. She went through the process of having to create the education that she couldn't find, that she needed. And then after 9/11 happened and people stopped traveling to come to her classrooms where she would do teaching and where she would write books, she decided to take all of her classroom training, put it on video and upload it. This is before YouTube.
Right.
That's when Lynda.com started. So I got started in the same vein. My first course was 2004 when Lynda was saying, why don't you stop making Illustrator books and turn it into a course and do a course for me?
That is so awesome.
That's where it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people forget that there was a time on the internet where we couldn't stream video.
Yep.
We couldn't even do transparency. Like we couldn't have transparent imagery on a website. And I'm glad my path started back in those days, so I could ride the wave of watching the internet evolve into our everyday life in ways we couldn't even impact. Part of my path included people saying, what is email anyway? We're never going to use email at work.
And maybe future generations won't. Like I was actually just thinking like this week, like with all the announcements on AI, like this thing right here. I don't know if you've tried GPT-4o or if you've seen some of the demos of Project Astra, but I'm blown away. Like the same things that I remember in terms of the evolution about how the internet, and even before the internet, but I see Stacy here from St. Louis. Like my moment of epiphany for why I wanted to be a graphic designer was I was visiting my uncle in St. Louis and he had a Mac Plus, like this little teeny thing. I have one of them sitting up there. That's what it is. So like that the way that technology was then, I think we're going through we went through that with mobile, right?
Yep.
And I think right now we're going through the same thing in terms of, where AI is going to take things. And I just mentioned this now, like I have a 21-year-old daughter who like email like is not that interesting when you're on WhatsApp or you have other things. And even myself now at LinkedIn, I find it used to be that we were on email all the time, but now I'm in Slack for like, especially in the world of product, I'm in Slack maybe for 85% of my communications.
Yeah. I have a theory about that.
What's your theory?
Is it back with data?
I believe it is. Yes, it is. So see, when I think about email, this always made me the weirdo teaching Outlook. But when I think about email, I don't think about email. I think of it as communication. And so when I'm teaching an email class, and I may be using Outlook as a software or whatever, but I'm really teaching about effective communication and then managing communication and tasks and things like that. And the ability to use what people called the scary chat rooms, back in the early days of the internet, like when we implemented the ability to have chat products into our work life, it gave me the capability to separate my internal communication with my teams from my external communication that needed to occur in the formality of an email. And so it's like I have two places to search that I know if I'm going for this type of information, it's here. If I'm going for this type of information, it's here. And so I love the fact that we have products that serve both. And I'm a Microsoft fan, and that since. So we use Microsoft Teams. I know people give it a bad name, but it's changed the way I read my communication and support my team. So yeah, I kind of got geeked out about that. Sorry. No, but we are talking about products. That's a game-changing product for us to be able to implement chat internally with our teams.
I think there's something else happening. So I'm an extrovert, so I know what I think when I start talking and not before. But I'm realizing how the world is sort of separating, at least the communications that come to me, and I get, zillions of emails every day, a higher and higher percentage of them being emails I don't care about at all.
Yeah.
Right. But the ones that I'm supposed to care about, it's sort of like there are people who are stuck primarily corresponding by email, and maybe I don't have data on this except my own anecdotal data, but it's surprising to me how many of the people who are emailing me are then asking me to take something that they gave me, print it out, sign it, scan it, and send it back. Whereas the people who are texting me, right, or sending me something in another channel are like, click here to be able to sign something, right? It's sort of like, it feels to me like the world is separating into people where email is like the max of what they will ever know how to do. And their business processes are standardized around email, and they probably spent a boatload of money to get there, right? Because while I was dragging my feet doing nothing, I was also the enterprise architect for a Fortune 500 company.
Right.
I know about this stuff, right? They spent like millions of dollars standardizing an email process. And this is important, right? That they take a look and say, what's the next thing? Because when you send me something on my phone and expect me then to print, sign, and send it back, you're done with me, right? Until I am back in the office, logged onto my computer, or care about doing that stuff. I usually write back and send them a link to how you can get a free trial of DocuSign or something like that. It's like, hello, right? Because so many people, their email is limited to what you can do with a mobile device.
Listen, I have to say this. I have been known to respond with an attached Adobe PDF and the converted form version so that they could use it for their business operations.
That's right. Me too.
Yeah, that's terrible. But I realized, and Mordy, you'll love this because you're an Adobe guy. Like, I realized very early on, like, not everybody was going to get Adobe Acrobat, and I was like, why? Now I know why. It's cost related, probably, but it's still why. So, and then I just don't think people actually realize exactly how these products are designed to make the creation of forms like that easy for all of us. So again, back to products that make our life better, our devices being able to communicate across a computer, a mobile app, wherever I'm at, I can access everything through a series of products. Absolutely love that. What I don't love is when I work with organizations and like their leadership texts people and they have no infrastructure in place and they're texting people using just like their whatever. I'm like, this is not an effective way to communicate. Knowing they're paying for the licensing. They already have access to all these things. They're just refusing to implement it. And it's really a training issue on a product. So yeah.
I think in general, it's just about the reasons and the purposes for the communication. Like what I find that like Slack lets us move at the speed of light. Like engineers are working on something and they're like, do you want the button to be blue or green? And the engineer, the product person, the design person are all on the Slack chat or in the channel. And you make decisions very, very quickly. And worst case, like, hey, I'm trying to build this. I don't know how to actually track the data in the right way to the right data set. And then you just can pull in the data scientist right away into the conversation. And it just makes you move that much quicker, at least for that. Can you even imagine a world of email where you need to follow a thread of that? Like, it's not possible.
No.
It's almost like you're in the same room, and anytime you need, you just add someone else to the conversation and we make that happen. The challenge is when you make decisions, and in the world of business, you need to like say, we made this decision, and you need to clearly communicate that decision to a team. We are prioritizing this. We have made a decision that this is going to be the area that we're focusing on. And if it's buried in a Slack channel somewhere, Or I would say, like, because Slack is text-based, there's a lot of use of emojis. So if somebody puts in some information and a lot of people just thumbs up, or they write ACK or something else like that. And again, it makes things move quickly. But then like a year later, everyone wants to know, like, why did we make this decision? Like, good luck. And usually when you have an email, there's like a email that goes out to the team that says, we made this decision, here are the reasons why, so on and so forth. So I think you have to match like the use for the right, like whatever the purpose of the communication is, you need to make sure you're matching the right method for that.
That's so great. Again, to the separation of my internal communication with my teams to my external communication through email, which, you know, it requires that official, like, you know, hey, we're going to send official responses through here, but like, if you want to know what data set to hit, go put it in the dev chat.
Yeah.
We do the same thing in Think Data.
So I'll ask a question though, Robin, because part of what you're talking about, Mordy, and I absolutely agree with you. But if I were still in the world of dev, which I'm really not right now, but if I were still supervising developers, and managing developers, I would be telling them, you actually need to document the decisions that were made, because that really does belong on the dev side, right? So I heard blue, not green, right? And even if it's just Slack, this date, this something, so that there's some breadcrumbs to go back. Because you're right, you're sitting with a client a year out, right? When you're rolling the product over finally, and somebody says, when I last saw this was this, and now it's this, and how were those decisions made? And it's like, we'll get back to you, know. And then it's archaeology, which is what got us out of this to begin with, right? Because if your approach to managing your business is an archaeological approach, email is great, right? But right.
Our solution for this is Scott. So, like, hey, this is the way we're going to communicate. Scott, when you see it,
document it. Okay.
And he is like, we accuse him of being a robot. Like,
I was just going to say though, like the robot part, that's the future there. So like, if there's any Slack developer, if there's any Slack product people out there, my recommendation is that we should have a checkbox for any message to say this is a decision, and then that gives some kind of weight at least to that. I don't know if you've used a product called Glean. We just started using it at LinkedIn. No. Incredible product. So the beauty of, at least when you work in an environment like a company like as large as LinkedIn, you have a crazy amount of conversations that are happening constantly. What do we have? 20,000 employees at LinkedIn. So there's just a lot of conversations, documents. Some teams like Google Docs, some teams use Microsoft Office 365. Some people communicate in Outlook. Some people communicate in Slack. Glean is like a product that is like a chat-based search engine, if you will. And it connects to all of your enterprise all of your enterprise data across the entire company. So sometimes I'll be in a company meeting and somebody will mention a project. Everyone has all these code names for a project. And I'm like, I never heard of that before. And I don't want to admit that I don't know what that project is. I can go to Glean and I could just say, hey, tell me about this project. And then within like 10 seconds, it gives me like a summary of what the project is, who's currently working on it, who I should reach out to for that. And it's going through all the data across Google Docs, Office 365, Slack, Slack conversations, and everything else. So the reason why I mentioned this is because you mentioned the robots and Scott. Like I hope Scott has a job for forever. Like I don't.
He does, because he's brilliant outside of
that. But from that perspective, I would say like the real thing is that I should be able to at any time just say, hey, when was this decision made? And that data is there. Like someone should be able to pull it up. And I think that, eventually AI will do all that for us. And when I say eventually, like it's here now.
It's here now.
Like now.
Yeah.
I remember when Slack was first created, that the goal of the person who developed Slack, can't remember who it was, but their goal was to actually have a common hub for all of the communication that was coming in. They weren't thinking of it as like this text act for teams. They were thinking of, I'm trying to always figure out, did I get something through SMS? Did I get it through email? Did I get it through? So Slack was supposed to be an aggregator for communication, and yet almost nobody uses it that way. And the other thing is, if it's an aggregator, that little checkbox that you're talking about, something that says, this message minimally should be indexed, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing, or the ability, because you can go in and you can tag stuff so you can go back and find it. I mean, you can go back and tag even with an emoji that says, when I go search for the birthday cake emoji, I want to see everything, regardless of where it is that I have access to. But that's not how it's being used. But you're right, Mordy, adding something that says this is part of our ongoing documentation, or this was a decision, or both. Right. This is something we're accountable for this. Ryan By noted, auditability, the ability to go in and to ask, how did we make this decision? Right. And when, how and when.
Well, see, this is, to me, like, I just want to kind of talk this out a little bit, because I think what's important about Scott is not that he's compiling the information, but that he is responsible for it. And if these are the ways we choose to communicate, then we have to have someone who has ownership of that portion of the communication. And yeah, I'm like loving the idea of bringing him the ability to use AI in our channels. And, the one good thing we have going for us is we have full adoption of Microsoft 365 inside our ecosystem here. And so we're already primed for Microsoft's versions of AI and Copilot. And I'm loving that. But I'm thinking, if I'm still teaching people how to, like, here's Microsoft 365 and it's an aggregator of your information and you should adopt it, they got to do that before they're going to ever be able to leverage some of the products coming out in AI. I'm going
to check out Glean, though. That sounds interesting. That sounds really interesting. My biggest use of Slack is I'm a board member for a not-for-profit, and the board is trying to use Slack. We're working on them, but the staff is all over the state of Michigan, and they meet in person maybe 3 times a year, so they're heavy-duty Slack users. And when I take a look at what they're trying to do, even for me to be able to go in and get an update about something right now, I know I'm looking for something, but I have no clue what channel it's in. I should be able to, and I'm not going to tell them how they should create their channels more uniquely, which would be nice for me as a board member, because it's working for them. But to be able to go in and say, could I get an update on this course? Or on, this particular effort, water protectors training camp that's happening in August. Could you just tell me about that and have it search everything? So I'm going to hit Glean hard and take a look at it.
Oh yeah, that sounds neat.
And Glean's an AI tool, Mordy?
It's an AI tool. It's an enterprise AI tool. Like, I don't know if there's a consumer version of it. I don't know how that would work, but it's pretty awesome. I was blown away. AI has recently been blowing me away in a good way.
Yeah. So you made mention something in our pre-discussions prior to the episode, talking about AI, and I'd love for you to kind of talk about that story. Talking about driving a car, because like it's impacted me all week. I've been recording Copilot videos all week, and all I can think about is what you said in that conversation about that. So I'd love for you to share that for everybody.
I mean, one of the benefits of working at a company like LinkedIn and tied to Microsoft is you're really kind of on the bleeding edge of seeing how these tools are being developed and brought into. And honestly, like, we are continuously being pushed hard to think about, like, how does AI make our products better? How do we think about that perspective? And just to link the data part in, like, AI doesn't work without data, right? These are all the conversations about, like, ethics and, like, what kind of data can you use to train the AI? Right. So there's whole conversations at least about that. I won't cover that part, right? But clearly, like, AI doesn't work without the data component of it, right? You need far more input, at least for that, to get something that's good out of it. So The thing though is that like when we think about like building product and thinking about like how you integrate AI, when you're like,
Oh, did he freeze or did I freeze?
I think Morty just froze.
At least he froze on a really
how
great.
about now? Am I back now?
You're
You
back.
are back now.
We were
Okay,
just
weird.
mentioning you froze on a good
Odd.
face.
Okay, that's almost with a good face. There you
It
go.
was a
Yep.
good face.
Yeah. So I was just sharing that, like, you know, when we think about like building AI products at LinkedIn, right? So when you're a product person, generally you have a very strong vision for like how you want the experience to be when somebody uses your product. And coming from my background as a graphic designer, I'm very thoughtful about what color am I choosing, what typeface am I choosing, how am I thinking about hierarchy design, where do I want the person to start and end up? Like, it's storytelling, right? I'm taking you along on a journey. And in order for you to take you along, I have to control, this is when you see this and this is when you see that.
Yes.
The challenge with AI is you have to give up a certain amount of control to let the AI make certain decisions. So I may say, for example, that like, let's take, I don't know, if I were a newspaper editor, and we always talk about like what news is on page one. And there are people who sit at, let's say, the New York Times, and they are page one editors, and they decide here are 50 potential news stories for today. I, as the expert, am going to choose that this is the one that we're going to run with as the first news story, and the second one and the third one that continues in the next page, right?
Yep.
Everyone then gets that exact same experience. But in the world of AI, when you're building a product that's AI, the whole value, if you will, of AI is that it's completely personalized. Ginny, what you see on page one of the New York Times should be the articles that are most relevant or interesting on things you care about. And Robin, the same thing for you, which means that if I'm an editor at the New York Times, I lose control over a certain amount of what you will experience in my product. Meaning my job maybe now is not what story that you're reading, but my job is that you will see I'm optimizing for the best relevant experience that you would have. And I'm not optimizing for the best story or the best headline or something else like that. And the analogy that I was using was like recently, like I got a Tesla. I love the car. I think it's fantastic. It completely like changes the concept about like driving in many, many different ways. But obviously, it is this idea of like having an autopilot where you're driving a car on the highway, you're going 60 miles an hour, and you just hit a button, and now the car takes control, and the car is driving, and you're sitting in the seat, and the car is changing lanes, and it's making adjustments. It's slowing down when it's in traffic. It's speeding up. It knows where you're going. But you don't have, like, you feel that loss of control, like, oh my God, like I'm not the one that's driving this car. What will happen? Right. And I think that analogy applies to how we have to think about like what a world of AI kind of means to us in the world of product. And it accentuates how important data is, because the AI is making decisions based on that data. So if I'm putting in, if the data that Tesla is using to build its autopilot is from a whole bunch of race car drivers, I don't know how comfortable I would be sitting in that car if I were driving in New York City traffic.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that like, as we embrace this idea of like moving towards a world where AI is going to determine a lot of our products, then our focus needs to be more about what data are we feeding into the AI and how are we telling the AI to react to that data, and less focus on should the buttons be blue or green, should story one appear here or there. And it's a completely different like shift in how you think about building product from that perspective.
Yeah.
And that's what like the head of product at LinkedIn, like Tomer Cohen, he has a couple of great courses in the LinkedIn Learning Library, highly recommended, on like how to even think about building products with AI. But it's that approach. You're not building the experience anymore. What you're building is, under circumstances A, B, and C, these are the types of things that should happen. And it's just a completely different approach.
It is. I think it's the control that stuck with me all week, Morty, when I was preparing and recording, because, you know, we're all trying to figure out what it will do. Everybody's trying to figure out how to prompt it to do exactly what they want to do. And then I'm trying to figure out, okay, what did it just do so I can teach to it or teach around it. And it is hard to let go of control because I felt myself going, well, man, I can do this faster. I'm going to just do it like this. You know, oh, I know how to do it. But that's me. I know how to do it.
Right.
But like I'm imagining the generations coming behind us that they probably will only prompt. Like, you know, I've learned how to drive it with my hand. I've learned how to drive it with my keyboard. Now I'm gonna learn how to drive it with my mouth. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like it's a complete change in the way we think, but it also makes me realize, like, because we are letting go of a certain amount of control, it doesn't mean we're letting go of any validation.
No, those are the guardrails you need to think about when you're building.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And just
I'll give
thinking,
you a good example. I'll give you a really good example. Like there's a concept, if you've heard of, called red teaming. Like red teaming is when you purposely try to get an AI to do something bad. Right. It's like, it's ethical hacking, right? If you're a programmer, like you want to try to, how do you find, you know, issues in your code, right? So you try to break it. You do everything you can to break it, right? Penetration testing, right? In the world of IT. So red teaming is a similar thing. Like you just have a whole bunch of people that do their best to try to get AI to break. And in that process, again, their focus is less about this is what the output should be. And it's more about, I don't want you going down this path, or this happens, I want you to recorrect from that perspective. And it just changes, again, the way that you think about how technology is moving forward, but also how you think differently about, again, the data that you're accessing and using for that as well. Like that's how hallucinations come in and things like that.
So and again, it's so interesting to be in this spot because, again, like, you know, 2 decades ago, we're all waiting to be able to post a transparent image on the internet and maybe stream a video. And now in real time, Mordy, all of us are facing, how do we implement this use of AI into our daily life, into our product design, into our teams effectively? And we have to do it in real time. Like you're learning and doing this in real time, and then having to turn around and implement it into your team. Again, you're paving a path for others later.
I think everyone's just figuring it out as you go along. And hopefully you have like a lot of smart people that are all motivated on trying to do the same thing. And I'll make the same analogy like before, like early in my career, like when I first got started, I bought myself an Apple computer, and I knew I wanted to do design, but I didn't have any experience. Like, who's going to hire me? And I just started playing with things, what I thought was interesting. Like, what can I make this computer do? Newsletters from my family about like what was going on in the family. Like I didn't have any customers, hire me at least for that. It was an expensive piece of machinery in that time to use for that particular purpose. Make a picture of Snoopy, jump up and down or things like that. It brought me joy to try to get and challenge myself to try to get it to do something that I felt I accomplished something. Like my real first computer was a Trash 80, right? The TRS-80, the Radio Shack computers, right? And I remember writing basic code of just telling it like to just say the same phrase and keep repeating it and looping it without any way to close the program. So it would just, loop on the screen like forever, saying hello, hello, hello a million times. And I'd just be giddy like doing that. I think it's the same thing today with AI. Like, I don't know what it might possibly be able to do, but every time I see someone on LinkedIn posting a demo or a video or something that inspired them, it inspires me to try something different. And even this morning, I was like talking to GPT-4o, and I was just like having a conversation with it about stupidity. But as I was having that conversation, I was like, oh, that was an interesting response. And now let me see how I might apply that to something at work. And there's a part of like data play that I think is the same thing. You look at a data set and it's like, there's no insight sets there. But you keep turning it upside down and playing with it and saying, what happens if I pull this out? And then something pops up and you're like, oh, that takes you down an interesting path.
Yeah.
That then drives some insights for it. So I think we're in the world right now of AI. That's the period we're in right now. Everyone is like playing with some interesting things. I think everyone right away in today's world, we just want to know, like, okay, but what's it going to do for me now? Like, why am I paying for this?
Yeah, instant gratification.
Yeah, but I think that if you really want to like think about what the future is, there are not a lot of times in our lives when like we have an opportunity to actually shape the future. And this is one of those moments where like we have access to things on our phone or data sets or things to kind of mess with and play with, that we could determine and build something in the future. And there's no other experts that are out there that are telling you that you can't do that.
Right.
There's no teacher that's telling you you did that problem wrong. Like it's the Wild West, but it's creating opportunity.
Well, see, that's, I think, is important for us too, you know, when we're recording our course content and thinking about to the learner, like what is the impact to the learner here? So I know for me, just trying to figure out where do I sit in this whole land of things. And I know Jenny and I have talked a lot about course development and data sets and things like that. But I just remain true to, this is how I think. This is what I would do. This is how I would tweak it. Oh, wait, this is what it did. Okay, now I can do this. Okay, now I'm going to have to do a little bit of this, but now I go back here. Just because I think we all have to learn to shift gears in our brains on how we actually start talking to a machine, which just seems, you know, crazy, but we've been talking to them forever. Like, it's not like brand new to talk to a machine. It's just, we've been using
they never spoke back before. And now they're finally.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
I don't think people mention Alan Turing often enough these days.
Yeah, true.
You know,
true.
The thing that I think ties this back for me to our conversation about data fundamentals is the importance of what happens, what kind of data sets we're collecting, and we point out what kind of data sets we're using. Are the data sets that are being used for the autopilot for Tesla all Le Mans drivers, or are they all 80-year-old grandmothers who have perfect driving records? Because you know what I mean. There's like, I'm sure there's somewhere in between there that's where you want to hit. But when I think about how, in some ways, it feels to me like in some ways very little attention has been paid to making strong data sets that we understand across, you know, the last however long, 40 years, however long, that we have data sets. And if the data sets are things that aren't that strong, then we take a crosscut, or we, you know, take some of it and enhance it in Excel. But that enhancement that we're doing at the desktop level or the cell phone level, right, never goes back to actually improving the data set that everybody is using, right? So often that's an individual effort. And so to me, there's something to be said for the importance of a more rigorous and yet more thoughtful data science approach and data engineering approach that I don't think we typically see.
Right. I would agree with that. I would totally agree with that.
There definitely is like just a huge difference though between like public data and private data.
Yes.
And I get this all comes down to like where, like what consumer applications or where these things kind of live. But I remember like a conversation with some folks at IBM many years ago when they were working on Watson. And I think at the time they had shared that like 90% of the world's data is protected behind firewalls. Like it's company private data. It's not, we talk about like the billions of data points that exist across the public internet. But the vast majority of data that exists is private data. So the question there is going to be like, can organizations or companies take advantage of what's probably more trusted data within their organizations? Like I'm imagining like that's where like people want to know like, why is Microsoft one of the most like valuable companies in the world and things like that. Like clearly like where Google sits is mostly, obviously Google Docs changes the game, but think about it, like Amazon has, the servers, the server business that they have, right? And how many companies are using Amazon to host their data? How many people are using like Google Docs and Google Suite to host their data? The vast majority of data is not something that's visible to us, at least. And it's interesting to think about like where that trust is. I do believe that like AIs within organizations will enjoy, for the exact point that you're making, Ginny, a better experience because you have data that is of higher quality, that is more meaningful towards business outcomes. Like most companies are not just tracking a whole bunch of Twitter conversations. They're tracking like their own financial data that matters to the future of that business. So I do think the tools that we'll start to see that will really change productivity and things will be how companies can move faster. And I think that, yes, you'll have the public part of it, which is interesting, which will continuously have its challenges, at least for that. What I don't have visibility into is like how much private data Tesla has, right? In terms of like how they think about training their data for that. I'm hoping that they're being smart about it. But take that even a step further to like
That's an interesting thought. Like
think about governments, like and the control of the data that they have, like that you don't have access to. So all these things I think just lead towards just knowing the data. Like the first question you should ask about any AI is, where is this data coming from? And that will lead you down the right path. And as you think about building products, think about like, okay, what is the data that I'm feeding into this product? And if you are able to have a really solid understanding about that, I think that will set you up for success.
I like that.
I think it was maybe 2 years ago, probably at a Microsoft conference, that the statistic they rolled out is that 85% of all business data is totally unused and unexamined. So this is opportunity writ large, right? Lots and lots and lots of data, and how to make that more trusted data to be used, for future applications against that private data. Because you're right, the public data sources there are great public data sources, but there are limitations to all of that. And the other thing is the ability for us to actually look at documents as data, which we couldn't even do that 10 years ago.
Right.
Easily.
Right.
Now everything's data, where it used to be that, that data had particular formats. Now it's all data.
All of it, structured, unstructured, and everything in between.
Yep.
So I want to change gears a little bit, if we can. Although this has been thrilling, and I hope we can continue to.
Well, if we can't change gears, we can ask Mordy to ask his car to change gears.
That's right, and he will watch it happen and feel okay about
there you
it.
go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, earlier discussion was kind of like, I was curious. I am an entrepreneur by some people's definition. I really just consider myself a small business owner, but whatever, but I do get to have conversations with a lot of people who are startup founders. They're building their businesses. They've developed these new products, and who cares what the product is? They're developing a product. They feel like it's going to be it, and they're in love with it. And so the question I presented to you was, you've got the person who's in love with their idea. They're in love with their product. They're in love. And then they have a team of people maybe that support it, that may love it, may not love it. And so the question is, do you have to love a product to be effective with a product? And what are the challenges of being too in love with your product? Because I loved your answer.
Ginny, do you want to go first, or you want me to jump in?
Oh, I think it was your answer she loved, Mordy.
I always love Ginny's answers.
Well, my kids are my product, and I love them, and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Right,
so,
that's right.
That's true.
So let's apply this to the world of technology products, at least,
yes.
Or physical ones that you're building outside of that. I found it like interesting because everyone always says like, do what you love, and generally there are people that like follow their passions, and there's how many billions of videos on LinkedIn that talk about how to succeed in your career and things like that. But it was a good question to ask because I felt like I kind of sat on several sides of that. So when I was recruited by Adobe to be a product manager, obviously, like I loved everything about graphic design. I still, if you ask me now, like my favorite digital product, it's still going to be Adobe Illustrator. I love what it does. And the team has been able to now leveraging AI. They're just doing amazing things with it. But it was something that, like, when I joined the company, I was hired because there was a shift of moving from the analog world to digital very quickly, but even more so to the web. And Illustrator was like always like the product that was still living in the analog world, at least for that. It was basically just replacing pen and paper. But nothing that I would say that, like, like I said before, you couldn't export, you couldn't, create a GIF out of Illustrator or something like that. So, JPEGs, those things that was not was not something that Illustrator was good at.
That's right.
So I was hired specifically because I was already pushing the envelope with Illustrator. Like, I was seen in the field as an expert who was using Illustrator, and Adobe at the time was like a very engineering focused organization who were like building solutions, but they weren't actually using the products day to day. So I was hired because a lot of engineers would be building stuff and saying, I wonder if this is useful. Like, maybe one day you're out in the field and you invent the wheel and you don't know, it's just kind of cool. It looks cool to you. And you go ahead and you shop it around and other people find amazing things to do with this wheel. It's going to change civilization. So I was able to join the company at a time where, like, I was a graphic designer and I would be able to tell the engineers what I felt was valuable. Like today, we at LinkedIn use to build product, a framework called jobs to be done, which is you think about like, what are the things that someone needs to do, and you build a product that solves that particular need, right? That job. So that concept didn't exist 25 years ago, like at Adobe. It would be like an engineer would build this and say to the product manager, go figure out a way to get people to want this.
To buy it. Yep.
Or give me a reason at least for that. So I was someone who had, was already, like, at that time, I was like on the speaking circuit. I was speaking at conferences. I had written a couple of books. I thought I knew everything there was to know about Illustrator. And it wasn't just a knowledge kind of thing. Like, I was in love with the product. I loved everything that it did. The reason why I knew so much about it was because every waking moment I would push it beyond its limits. I'd be telling the engineer, I would be going to the engineer saying, here's what I did with it. And they were like, how did you do that? Like, we didn't build it to do that kind of a thing. Like, it was just, something that was just amazing to them. So I remember that, like, when I got there to Adobe, like, the kinds of decisions that I was making was based on what I felt I knew about the product. And because I loved the product so much, I was kind of blind to what other people felt Illustrator could also be used for.
Oh, wow.
And but love is blind. Is that what they say? Like, how do you define love? It's that you don't see the imperfections in the person who you love, right? That's what it is. You're so in love with this person that even though they're not perfect, it doesn't matter to you.
Yeah, you don't care. Yeah.
When you're in love with a product, there are imperfections in your product, and you overlook that and you say, I don't care. Like, it's still the most amazing product. And from a competitor perspective, you can easily say that, let's say at that time, like, Freehand was a competitor, and somebody would say, oh, Freehand does this really cool thing. And I would say, okay, but who cares? Like, our product is still the better product. And, like, you would not even listen. You would not be open to listening to, like, some kind of criticism, if you will, about your product. So that was like one element where I think if you love your product too much and you're the person who's in charge of defining the future of that product, then it's harder for you to be open to criticism, or to even yourself be humble or realize, you know what, we could do better, at least for that. The thing that really kind of like completely woke me up to this concept was Adobe used to send us out to, like, visit our customers. And I remember going to, like, a very large customer, Walmart. They're based in Bentonville, Arkansas, in the middle of nowhere. Walmart is the largest company. And they were using Illustrator in ways I cannot imagine. And I remember, like, here I was, I'm more of the city guy, right? I'm the Steve Jobs designer, black turtleneck, Starbucks in my hand kind of a thing, having a very clear understanding about what high-end design actually means. And then walking into this company and them making requests about saying, we really want Illustrator to do this and this and this, and we're not happy with this, and we're using. And initially I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, that's not how design works. And then they were showing me the innovation that company was doing. And this was then, like, now you walk into supermarkets and you see, like, graphics on the floor, you see on the windows. No one was doing that. They invented that. Like, they were the ones that, like, were using Illustrator to do things that were just not possible. And it blew me away. I was like, I can't even imagine that. And leaving that customer visit completely changed my own perception about what I thought Illustrator should or could do, at least for that. And it was a humbling moment, at least for that. There was another trip also, like to Japan, where like in Japan, the world of typography, like think about like calligraphy and things like that and paper, like the typography as an art form is something that is completely different in the Far East than it is in the United States. And here I grew up as a designer who I thought I knew everything there was to know about typography and Helvetica and all the high-end things. I knew nothing compared to like what any little kid in Japan knew about typography. And when I understood the requirements for like what Illustrator needed to be able to do in the Japan market, it completely changed my perception. And it didn't make me love the product less, but it took that like love and it put it knocked it down a few levels to allow you to open up to receive criticism, to understand that your way is not the only way. So that's much of my general advice. Like, I think you don't have to love a product. If you love a product and you're a product leader, it might be easier for you to rally more engineers to get excited about your product. It might mean that you can do a better job working with marketing and getting them to do a cool campaign that would engage more people. But I don't think it's like any better than like someone who's just a really great product manager who can look at data without any bias and make good decisions from that perspective.
That was it right there. Yeah. I loved the insight that sometimes it's good to not have a bunch of everybody loves it all the same way, because it could cause a bias. And we already deal with bias on so many other levels we don't address. Like, I thought it was good for me to hear as a product developer to have that insight. And I also think it's interesting that, you know, I want to reflect on the fact that you had two key moments in your product life that have probably impacted every single product you've ever looked at outside of Illustrator. I know your examples are there in Illustrator, but it just opened your worldview to see products differently. And I hope people in our audience who are in the product world, you know, can bank on, hey, you're going to have this moment, you know, and it might totally change the way you see things in a very positive way. Woo, that's good stuff. I don't know if I can top any of that.
It's not a competition. I'm just grateful that I had that opportunity early in my career, as opposed to like much later in my career for that.
Yeah.
And that has helped you, to your point, that it has helped me. We all suffer from bias. Like that's you're never going to get rid of it completely. And bias can be good sometimes. But it's just a continuous reminder now, like whenever I have something that I want to build and I get really excited about it, I have to just remember, okay, now I seek out other people who maybe will disagree with me. Like, help me figure out why what I'm doing is like, tell me why this might be a bad idea. And that just helps you think more critically about being real and dealing with that bias. Maybe that's the right way to say it.
You mentioned red teaming earlier for AI.
Yeah.
And in some areas in industry, they use red teaming to do exactly what you're describing.
Yep.
To tear it apart.
Yep.
And make it better. It's not to get rid of the idea. So when you deal with early entrepreneurs who are brand new into this space, like it's like it hurts their feelings. when you're like, okay, but this is good advice.
Well, or when you send something to QA and they break it and your feedback is you didn't use it right. Right? I mean, how many times have we seen it? You didn't use it right. It's like,
you did it wrong. Yeah. All those TikTok videos of you doing it wrong. And I'm like, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as doing anything wrong.
Right.
Unless you're doing basic math.
And then you can do it wrong.
Yeah.
And so can Copilot, just FYI. No, just kidding.
There you
go. It maybe didn't do it wrong. It just didn't do it quite the way I wanted it to, but it still did it. Interesting conversations to have ahead. Mordy, thank you so much for coming and doing this episode with us. We appreciate you dedicating your time to prepare for the episode and be here. I know it's going to be impactful to our followers. And again, we hope you'll come back and visit us again someday.
I certainly will do that. Happy anytime.
The other thing we should mention, somebody actually texted me and said, what did we do with Bill Shander?
Oh, I forgot to say what we did with Bill Shander.
Would you please?
Bill! Oh, sorry. Bill got caught by the travel machine. We'll just say that. So he's probably going to land in 1964 sometime.
And he really feels bad about missing this particular conversation. He was like primed. So
let me throw a shout out for Bill Shander. He interviewed me for his Listen and Lesson series, and it is probably the best interview I've given in my career. He was a great interviewer. I was so pleased, and I normally I'm all glammed up. I hate that part. So let's just not look at the fact that I have gigantic eyelashes and I look a little bit plastic, but it was a great interview. He gave me a really good forum to tell my story. So yeah, sorry, Bill, we missed you. Everybody check out that Listen series.
Yeah, and Mordy asked if you'd post a link. So
I will definitely do that. Do that.
Great.
All right, see you guys next time.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Mordy. Take good care.